Okay, we're live. Tenamar, we're live.
Tendamari. Oh, Tendamwadi. Tendamwadi. Tendamwadi.
Tenamari.
Mwadi Mukuru. Mwadi Mukuru. Mwadi Mukuru. Kudai Mizimukuru. Tendamwadi. 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 Regai mazwe another Tara Nefunga. The Mumangu, the Zikwini Mwadi. May the words of our mouths and meditations of our hearts be acceptably in thy sight, O Jah of our creation. Tendamwadi, Tendamwadi, Tendamwadi. God lives!
God lives!
God lives!
God lives!
God lives!
God lives!
Messiah lives!
Messiah lives!
Messiah lives!
Messiah lives!
Messiah lives! Tendamwadi, greetings, elders, brothers and sisters, princes and princesses, greetings to the most sacred, powerful, and bountiful name of our motherland, Alkebu-Lan, in the spirits of our most gracious ancestors, and in the prayer of oneness, hope, and prosperity for all African people upon the face of Mother Earth. Tendamwadi. Just before I continue, sister and brother, for those who are not familiar with the word sounds, Tendamwadi, it simply means in the Shona language, be thankful unto the Creator. So we say that we open speech, close speech, and punctuate the proud word with the word sounds Tendai Mwadi. Welcome, sisters and brothers, to the online channel of the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, Alkebu-Lan Way. Welcome to our 23rd Community Mosiah season, sisters and brothers. Give thanks and praise for those of us brothers and sisters who have engaged with us so far this season, from the opening ceremony on Africa Speaks on Galaxy Radio, Galaxy FUE, the only D-Boy watching station, and also last Sabbath with our brother Ifayomi Grant. Tonight, sisters and brothers, we have a very powerful, very special, very important reasoning, timely, apt and timely as we say. The subject this evening, sisters and brothers, is feminism versus African Nationalist Womanhood. A very important subject, sisters and brothers. We give thanks and praises to be joined by two powerhouses, the legendary Mama Professor Mambo Ama Mazama, all the way from the USA, one of the cornerstones of the Afrocentric movement, and one of the real warrior scholars of our time, of this time and all time, sisters and brothers, and also based here in the UK, our warrior queen here on these shores, Sister Kai Ouagadou-Mbandaka, organizer for over 3 decades on Liberation Road here in the UK. But this is our Mosiah season, sisters and brothers. So what we do, we've created, with a vision of our spiritual leader, Brother Leader Mbandaka, something called the Mosiah Daily Affirmations, which is what we use to guide ourselves through the Mosiah season. Mosiah is 31 days in honor and commemoration of the life and legacy of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And we created the Mosiah Affirmations to guide us through each day. Each day has an affirmation, a commentary, drafted by our spiritual leader, Brother Mbandaka, and a memory verse, because we realize and we affirm that any work that we do, sisters and brothers, has to include our children. If our children are not included, it will have no future. So we have our memory verses as well for our children, and all enclosed in our Mosiah Daily Affirmations. So I'm going to begin to go into the affirmation for today, which is day 11. So I'm going to begin. Okay. And the affirmation for today is called The Advantage of Complete Knowledge, Sister and Brother. So I'm just going to read that for you. These are the word sounds of the eminent prophet Marcus Mosiah Garvey. The advantage of complete knowledge. And the prophet says, it is the duty of man and woman to make their knowledge so complete in life, make it impossible for any other to take advantage of them. That is why you, men and women, always educating themselves inside and outside the schoolroom, finding out everything that is new. You need to know what is new so that nobody have you at a disadvantage. The person who walks the earth of success, the person who walks the earth a colossal success, but the person who doesn't know walks around and begs. That person is ignorant of everything, and yet God will never made a fool. It is the duty of everyone to learn all of nature's ways. Such is the wisdom of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Say, hail to the prouder word, hail to the prouder word, hail to the prouder word. And we move straight on, sisters and brothers, to our commentary, drafted by our spiritual leader, Prof. Ouagadou-Mbandaka, spiritual leader of the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement. And he says, and a commentary to the advantage of complete knowledge. To know is the greatest thing. Wari created the universe, then created us, giving us a conscious mind and intelligence to question and unravel complex universal laws. That is a process of attaining knowledge. To have knowledge is therefore to know that which is determined by nature or human intervention. To have complete knowledge is to have control over the processes of learning and to acquire self-mastery. This enables a people to command autonomy and self-determination, as our ancestors did in ancient times. We must strive, therefore, not only to know, but to have complete knowledge and to elevate ourselves and our people to our rightful station in this life. Such is the wisdom of our spiritual leader, Prof. Ouagadou-Mbandaka. So hail to the prouder word, hail to the prouder word, hail to the prouder word. And we also close off, as I said before, with our memory verse for the children. And the children will say that 3 times, sisters and brothers. Yes. The memory verse for the children. The children will say that 3 times, sisters and brothers.
How do I say that?
So, sisters and brothers, just getting it up in front of me. So if you have children listening to this, and brothers, you get them to chant this 3 times. I'll say it and they'll say it after me. The world has made being black a crime, and instead of making it a crime, I hope to make it a virtue.
The world has made it being black a crime.
So if you have children listening to this, and brothers, you get them to chant this 3
I
times. I'll
hope to
say it
make
and they'll
it
say it
a
after me.
virtue.
The world has made being black a crime, and instead of making it a crime, I hope to make it a virtue.
The world has made it being black a crime, and instead of making it a crime, I hope to make it a virtue.
The world has made being black a crime, and instead of making it a crime, I hope to make it a virtue.
The world has made being black a crime, and instead making it a crime, I hope to make it a virtue.
Tender my sisters and brothers, princes and princesses, right? Just say this is one of our Mosiah sessions. For the full program, sisters and brothers, go to our website, alkebu-lan.org, and get all the full details of what's coming up for the rest of this season, 31 days, in honor of the life and legacy of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. That's my role this evening, sisters and brothers. I'm going to hand over to our host, who's going to take us forward and introduce our 2 warrior empresses this evening, sisters and brothers, on the subject feminism versus African Nationalist Womanhood. It's none other than our young lion, or as our brother Tafsa called him, the giant Shakara. He is a brother, a warrior who grown up on Liberation Road. A brother of keen, powerful intellect and insight, and also, importantly, the CEO of a very important media institution in our community, Got Kush TV. So I'm going to hand over to Brother Shakara to introduce our guests and facilitate the reading this evening. Tenda Mahdi.
Tenda more kings and queens. Garvey lives.
Garvey lives.
Mosiah lives.
Mosiah lives.
Mosiah lives.
And what a pleasure it is to have you all here, kings and queens. You know what I'm saying, for this very, very special occasion. You know, Mosiah sessions online, and we give thanks for the online vibration. Even though, you know, it's coming in the midst of some challenges, because as was said in the first initial Mosiah session, it has allowed us to engender a more international flavor, yeah, to our Mosiah season this year, kings and queens. We do this every year because, as Brother Leader Bandaka teaches, a free people always celebrate the great men and women who have made a distinct contribution to their history. And so, as a Gavia organization, we see none more worthy of praise in terms of their magnanimous vision and the masterful organizational process which he instituted to fulfill that vision than the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and the men and women of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. And we have to remind ourselves that Papa Garvey didn't just build Papa Garvey, he built an organization and he built a government. And so we don't speak of Papa Garvey in isolation of the organization and the work and the movement that he built. But this particular session today is taking place as a part of our entire Mosiah series. And so you can get full information once again at Alkebu-Lan.org, alkebu-lan.org/Mosiah. I want to give thanks before getting into the program for a monumental event that took place over the end of Sabbath, the weekend, which was held online again, international convention, kings and queens, of the African people of the world, so to speak. As this year we are celebrating the 100th year anniversary of the International Convention of the Negro Peoples of the World, as held in 1920. The event during which, on the 13th day of the month of Mosiah, this beautiful flag that you see mounted upon the wall behind me was designated the flag, the colors of the race, the red, the black, and the green. And so in celebrating that centenary, a call went out coming from our brother Omawale Africa of Afrocentricity International. And many of us gathered and answered the call to the tune of, I believe, over 50 organizations and 70 presenters, kings and queens, over 2 days. It was a monumental event, family. And so, as the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, we were blessed to be able to take part in the person of our spiritual leader, Brother Leader Mbandaka, who took part in the first plenary on the subject of the spiritual legacy of Papa Garvey, and accompanied by one of our guests today, Mambo Ama, dealing with ritual acts of a sovereign people. And also myself was blessed to be able to take part in 2 workshops over the 2 days. And so we want to send a special shout out to the entire core team that sat at the center of making that monumental event take place, kings and queens. Honor to you all, and honor to all of the brothers and sisters who came, took part, presented, commented, said anything, you know what I'm saying? You know, even just watch silently. It was a monumental occasion, and we want to say that we hope that it acts as a springboard for greater operational unity among our various different organizations and networking in that regard. But we understand that that event would not have been possible had it not been for the institution that was developed by our first speaker today, kings and queens. And you know, I have memories of, I believe it was 2006, African Liberation Day. Yeah, and we heard that our mama by the name of Amma Mazama was on the bill, and I confess that I was unaware of the mama before that time. Yeah, but as we were enthusiastic about her message, because we knew that she was going to be speaking upon the great, beautiful tradition of Vudan, and we were all enthralled with the bicentenary of the Haiti Revolution, still 2 years after that bicentenary was being celebrated, kings and queens. And so when we heard, we were well infused. And as the message unfolded, yeah, the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement and the entire gathering at large became swept up in the spirit and the energy of our great mama. And I, as I kept saying, like from like halfway through the presentation, so I'm in love. I was absolutely in love, yeah, kings and queens, with our mama and the energy that she brought to the occasion. And ever since, Kings and Queens, you know, she has been a revelation to myself and the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist. We got to spend some time with her at our headquarters, and we realized that we were speaking to a kindred spirit, someone who got it like we got it and understood it like we understood it. And so it's a pleasure to have her. In fact, I hold in my hand one of the books that she has edited. It's called The Afrocentric Paradigm, Kings and Queens. It's a great and illustrious book filled with beautiful information in terms of developing our African-centered understanding of things. And so she is the the head of an organization called Afrocentricity International. She is also professor of Africology and African American Studies at Temple University, where she acts alongside another one of our greats, Baba Malefe Kete Asante. Kings and Queens, I encourage you, wherever you are, to please send your positive energies and receive our illustrious mama, who is currently residing in Guadeloupe, Kings and Queens. As you can see, it look very warm where she's there and very sunny and tropical. She's in Guadeloupe right now, Kings and Queens. And so welcome, Mambo Ama Mazama. Tenda Mwadi.
Potep, and asante sana for having me. You know, it's always a pleasure because the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement feels like family. And so when you invited me to speak about something quite important, I could not say no. I could never say no to you anyway. So whatever you ask, I'll be there. So thank you very much. I cannot hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. I apologize. I apologize. We're going to get into you in a second. Let me just also introduce our other guest, who is the senior pioneer of the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement. She has been called many things. She has been called the backbone. She has been called the engine room. She has been called, well, the disciplinarian, but we don't usually call her that to her face. You know what I'm saying? Kings and Queens. But without Mama Kai, Kings and Queens, the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement simply would not exist. Brother Leader Bandaka has said it publicly that when it comes to the daily running of the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, a lot of that is on the shoulders of our next speaker today, Kings and Queens, and she goes by the name of Mama Kai Ouagadou-Mbandaka. Tenda Mwadi.
Sorry, Tenda Mwadi. Garvey lives. Mosiah lives.
Kings and Queens. All right, so what's going to happen, brothers and sisters, is that Mambo Ama is going to kick off with a presentation, and then we're going to hear from Mama Kai, and then we're going to take question and answer discussion. When we take question and answer discussion, I'm going to share a link in the chat, and brothers and sisters who want to come on the panel live will have the opportunity to do so. If you would like to remain in the chat and just ask a question from the chat, you're also able to do so. I'm looking at the chat right now. I see my sister Melanated Goddess has joined me, Sister Miriam, and the great brother Omawali Africa. I hailed you earlier, brother Omawali, and I'm going to hail you again whilst you're here for your efforts over the weekend. You are an asset to the race, my brother. And no doubt when you get to 70 years old, we're going to be inducting you into the sublime order of the now. And if I have anything to say about it, it will happen. You know, my brother. So give thanks for your efforts. And once again, we look forward to growing together in World African Unity. We give thanks. All right, Mambo Amma, I'm going to hand over to you now because the people that didn't come to hear me, as good looking as I am, they came to hear you. So the floor is yours. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I guess I will share my screen, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Can you see my screen? Hello?
Not yet, Mambo Amma. So yeah, if you hit
what
the no. So at the bottom of the yeah. So basically I've got to see it in the back end first. So if you share,
okay.
So when you hit share screen, you might have to select a window or select share entire screen.
Mm-hmm. Share your screen.
Yep.
Share. No, it doesn't work.
So when you hit share screen, it will say you're gonna see a window come up where it says your entire screen, application window, or Chrome tab. Yeah, can you see that?
No.
That's unfortunate.
I think I may have.
Oh,
Okay.
We got something. Something's gone wrong there. Don't worry, Kings and Queens. We're gonna get back, Mambo Amma. Yeah.
You want me to sing?
Not quite. Not right now, Mama Kai. Let's see if we can get Mambo Amma back first. Big up to Sister Wahida in the building. Right, Mambo Amma, at the bottom where you see share screen. I'll take you through it right now.
But I can't. I
Scroll
do
down,
it, but it
scroll
doesn't
down.
happen.
Mama,
So
you
when
need to scroll down probably.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not a scroll down thing. She should see it immediately.
I see it, but when I click on it, nothing happens.
That's unfortunate. So are you? So
there is something that says Live Studio.
No. So not that
that's
one.
What I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. She needs to scroll down on her page.
No, it's not. It's not that, Mama Kai. This is not a scroll down thing. So so you see Leave Studio. Next to that, it says Invite, right?
No, it says Share Screen.
Okay. All right. So so hit that now.
Okay.
What happens?
I do that. Well, I see something. Can you see my screen?
Not quite. So so what I want to ask you to do now, does something on your screen now say your entire screen has a window count where it says your entire screen?
Yeah.
Right. So in that window, click on the window that shows what your screen looks like. Have you done that?
Yeah.
And once it's okay, good. Once it's highlighted, hit share, and then we're gonna get it through now. Okay. Oh, it's just gone. So okay, so do exactly what you just did again.
Okay.
We just had it. Bigging up brother Tristan Samuels, who also joined us over the weekend for the monumental event that was the RBG Centennial Conference.
So what about now?
There we go. We got it, Mambo. We got it.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Got it.
Yeah?
Okay. Sorry about this.
No problems.
Okay. So again, thank you so much. And this is a very interesting topic because and a very important one, because there's a lot of confusion in our midst, especially amongst our sisters, about this issue of feminism. I will confess that I myself was at some point a feminist. At least I called myself a feminist many years ago because I didn't know better. I didn't have the information that I have now. So first, I will start by saying that the perspective I will use in my analysis of feminism versus Afrikan Nationalist Womanhood is, so to find a way to do this, will be Afrocentric. So by this, I'm sorry, I'm having some issues here. Okay, sorry. By Afrocentric, I mean that I will look at, or we'll look at, as Afrocentrists, we examine ourselves from the standpoint of our culture, our history, and our biology. We are very clear about what our cultural preferences are. We're very clear about what our history is, and we're very clear about what our biology is. We know who we are. We should know who we are. Unfortunately, we are very confused. It's not our fault, but there's no need to stay in our confusion nonetheless when we can get out of it. Afrocentricity also demands a return to our African cultural values. And we need to do this because for too long we've been subjected, and we continue to be subjected to the cultural mores of people who have oppressed us, who have abused us, who continue to abuse us and oppress us, and we have become quite dislocated. That's the term we use in Afrocentric discourse, meaning we've moved away from our own sense of reality, from our own culture, our own history, and our own biology. And this has caused us, of course, tremendous suffering. And so we are interested in putting an end to our suffering. And since my topic is African womanhood, at least that's one of the terms of the topic, I want to take the time to look at the place of African women in African culture. And this, of course, takes me quite naturally to Diop's work, especially his work on matriarchy, when Diop came up with the theory of the two cradle theory, when he argued that there was a southern cradle, and there was a northern cradle, and that the southern cradle, which is us African people, in that cradle, the women have had a very special place, in great part because we have matriarchy, and in great part because we are mothers. And so when we look at some of the attributes of a matriarchal society, we see that women have a very special place, a place of honor, because we basically carry children and we carry life forth. And I have this beautiful picture here that I really like very much, of this man kissing this pregnant belly of his wife. And it speaks volumes about what matriarchy is about, honoring the mother and the woman. There's also another important aspect of matriarchy, as far as women are concerned, is that they play an important political role. We know that our history is replete with significant women as political figures, like the Queen Mother Yasantewa, Baitutatu, the Empress of Ethiopia. When we look at our history, we see that we have the earliest history of queens in their own right. This is Queen Tai, and we see Queen Yasantewa, and so on and so forth. We see all these women who were managed to rise to the highest political levels in their society, and there was nothing that basically prevented them from doing so. Another important aspect of matriarchy is that women are able to play a very important spiritual role. In fact, women in our culture, in our history, reach the highest level of spiritual initiation and responsibility. And again, if you contrast this with patriarchy, that's not the case at all. It is unthinkable, for example, that there could be a female pope. That's just unthinkable. But in our spirituality, because of this matriarchal orientation, we find that women, again, reach the highest level. Here I have a picture of some of my sisters, Mombos in Haiti. I'm on the picture on the far right. But these are all sisters, women who have reached, again, the highest level of initiation, are regarded with the greatest respect by men and women alike. Now, of course, we know that matriarchy came under assault, severe assault, especially during the Arab and European enslavement of African people and colonization of the continent. And that basically patriarchy was, I will not say deleted, but certainly was greatly interrupted and disturbed when our cultural space and consciousness were invaded by European patriarchy. And that's the Northern Cradle theory, Northern Cradle that Diop talked about. So when we compare matriarchy to patriarchy, we see that whereas women were perceived, they are perceived as very precious, because again, we are bearers of life. In the patriarchal system, it's just the opposite, that women are perceived as burdens. In fact, it's very interesting, I have this example here, that when in a patriarchal society, when a woman gets married, it is the woman's parents who must pay a dowry to get rid of their daughter. They're basically saying to the man, thank you for taking that woman away from us. Whereas in the African context, it's the other way around. There's also another important attribute of patriarchy, and it is the political subordination of men to women. I should say of women to men, I'm sorry. I got it wrong. So women are subordinated to men. I take as an example the fact that white women did not get the right to vote in the US until 1920. In France, it was not until 1965. In Portugal, it was not until 1976. And in the UK, it was not until 1928 that women over the age of 21 were able to vote. Until then, white women did not have any say in the political life of their communities, their societies. And when we look at the roots of Western culture, we look at Christianity, we see that the subordination is at the very heart of the Christian worldview. We know that Christianity demonizes women, that in that particular narrative, one who brings sin into the world, that brings death into the world by being undisciplined, being disobedient, being basically bad. That's the idea, that the woman is bad. And that because of her, then things go wrong. We also know that Europeans have engaged, from their Middle Ages up to the 19th century. So not so long ago, they've engaged in very vicious witch hunts. And it's hundreds of thousands of white women who were actually tortured, burnt, accused of all kinds of hideous crimes. They were accused of having made some deals with the devil, of having sacrificed children. They were set on fire publicly, and their daughter had to come and witness their mother being burnt alive. They had to hear their mother's screams. So it was very, very barbaric, extremely barbaric people. The men, white men, treating their white women very terribly. And again, when we see their Holy Trinity, you see again how they moved from the classical African Trinity, which included the woman, and in their philosophy, their worldview, the woman is gone. The woman is gone. There's no place in anything holy for a woman as far as white people are concerned, as far as white men are concerned. So, of course, the white women rebelled against this, and it is understandable. And I could talk about even today some of the injustices that white women still suffer. I did a little bit of research, knowing that you're based in the UK, and found out that about 100,000 women are raped every year in the UK. I also found out that there was a gross pay gap between white women and white men in Europe. So clearly, white women have many grievances to address to their men. And so feminism emerged at the end of the 19th century. And it was basically white women rebelling and trying to protect themselves. Interesting enough, and this is very important for us to keep in mind, feminism, like Marxism, is a conflict theory. By this, I mean that at the very heart of feminism, there is the notion that men and women are enemies in a very natural, inherent, almost genetic way, that men and women cannot really ally, get allowances for any dominate the woman. So feminism is fundamentally Western. It was born in Europe. By this, I mean Western Europe, the United
Sorry, man, but we're getting some interference, and it's cutting up a little bit. So I'm gonna wait for it to stabilize, and then I'm gonna ask you to jump back about 30 seconds.
So when we talk about feminism, what are we talking? It began in 1848. There's a convention, a Seneca Fall, and here I'm talking about U.S. context. And this, yes.
Yeah, sorry, I was saying.
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. There was a bit of interference, so your screen froze for a sec. So if you could just go back about 30 seconds, to where and then come back forward again so that we can,
What? But where would it be?
So after this.
This?
Yeah, no, after so you were in the middle of breaking down the fact that feminism is a conflict theory. Yeah, you were in the middle of that section. Yeah.
Okay, so I was here. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I explained that feminism is a conflict theory because at the very heart of feminism is the antagonism between men and women, and men and women are basically understood as natural enemies, with the men trying to oppress and suppress the woman. And I was insisting that we must keep this in mind, of course, because this is not necessarily how women see men anywhere else in the world. And I moved on and explained that feminism is fundamentally a Western phenomenon. Historically and culturally, it's white women seeking ways to protect themselves from, male oppression and attain equality with white men, for example, the right to vote and have a voice in the affairs of their society. So when we look at feminism, we are told that there are 3 waves, and we are in the 3rd wave currently. The first wave began in 1848 in Seneca Falls. There was a convention of white women who basically gathered and decided that they were going to fight for the right to vote. And that ended in 1920 when they were actually able to have that vote. They were also lobbying to have the notion that they were men's property removed, because then that's what they were to the white man, that a woman basically was just something that belonged to him. The second wave was in the 1960s, and this is associated with what is known as the women's liberation movement. Basically, white women again seeking sexual equality, or more rights, more prerogatives, trying to get on an equal, plane with the white men, be it in spheres of political, economic, or social life. And the feminists at that time were primarily white, educated, middle class, and heterosexual women who, basically felt that they didn't really need a man much, but except for maybe sexual gratification, but they could really do whatever a man did, they could do it. And you're probably familiar with this flyer here. I hate to say that I had that in my house at some point, because again, I didn't know better, but I liked the idea. I thought it was funny, but there's nothing funny about this, really. The idea that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. The truth of the matter is that a woman needs a man and a man needs a woman. But this was before I was Afrocentric. What happened with those white women is that they, being white, they display the same typical arrogance, that we find in white people, this ethnocentrism. And the assumption was that because they were oppressed as women, then all women in the world were oppressed. And they even went further as saying that this oppression, being oppressed by a man, is what makes a woman a woman. this is what, and I like this expression of vertical universalism. The white experience is universal by virtue of white people being superior. So it's a very interesting universalism indeed. They constructed or participated with white men in the construction of otherness. So you have the other woman, the woman of the third world, who was ignorant, poor, uneducated, tied to traditions, having so many children that she didn't want to have really, but that the men forced her to have. All she did was domestic work and so on and so forth. And the white women, you know, basically had this idea, these white feminists, that they were big sisters to African women or Indian women, and they were going to show them the way out of this male oppression. Very interestingly, although they complained about being oppressed by white men in their own societies, when they were presenting themselves to African women, Indian women, and other women, you know, in the world, they always portrayed themselves as being happy, as being having made so much progress in terms of being equal to men, as being in control of their body, in control of their reproduction, that they had the right to have or not have children, didn't have children. Of course, what we have along with that is the demonization of African men. African men basically born to oppress African women, and they're presented implicitly or explicitly as basically as oppressors, as executioners, beasts, wild and evil by nature, precisely because of their Africanness. It's very interesting that when a white man kills a white woman, they're going to talk about a crime of passion. But when a black man kills a black woman, they don't talk about anything like that. They indict the whole race, you know, black people being savages, and that's why black men act in such a savage manner. Although the outcome is the rest, but for white men, it's something almost noble love, but for black men, it's, you know, something very, very terrible. So it's clear that black women who were interested in feminism and who liked feminist ideas were nonetheless dissatisfied with the ethnocentrism, if not the racism that was pretty blatant in the feminist discourse. And so this gave birth to what is called Black feminism, African feminism, revolutionary Black feminism, third world feminism, Afrofeminism, and so on and so forth. It's very interesting that they felt the need to stretch feminism, just like Frantz Fanon had felt the need to stretch Marxism. And they had to stretch it to make it fit their reality. And their reality was that they were not oppressed just because they were women. They were oppressed because they were Black, or they were African, or they were quote unquote third world. And so there was a problem here because this feminism, of course, was not theirs to begin with. They did not create it, but they tried to appropriate it and inhabit it, but it never really worked. This appropriation or this blackening of feminism led to the third wave. And as I said, this is what we are in right now. That started in the 1990s. In fact, some people credit Alice Walker's daughter, I forgot her first name, but in 1992, this woman who was 29 at the time or something, or 23, wrote an article, published an article in the magazine, and she said, I'm a third wave. And basically she of heterosexual people, because she was bisexual. That's how she defined herself. And she said, this feminist style, this white women educated, all, heterosexual. Where am I as a Black woman, bisexual? Where am I? I can't find myself. So you have this third wave of feminism, which is meant to include, again, women of color, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender individuals. And we've even moved on to what some people call post-feminism, because of the influence of postmodernism on feminism. And if you know anything about postmodernism, it denies that there is any fixed reality. They say that reality is fluid, that is constantly changing. That's, of course, a heavy influence of Foucault. This type of discourse. So identity is not fixed, but it's fragmented and fluid. You cannot say I because you don't know who I is. 2 seconds ago, I was something else than now. So it makes it very difficult to be on sure grounds to say anything about anything. Postmodernism rejects notions of gender or race. They say that whiteness doesn't mean anything, blackness doesn't mean anything. These are just social constructs that can change, can be dismissed. In fact, if you remember Frantz Fanon in Black Skin, White Masks, this is what he recommended. He said that whiteness doesn't exist anymore than blackness, and these are racist constructs that must simply be dismissed, that we should just be happy to be man, of course, using that language, man or woman. And so this post-feminism, third wave feminism, has given birth to theories such as gender theory, the idea that although you may have male sexual organs, that doesn't mean that you're a male. Likewise, you may have female sexual organs, that doesn't mean that you're a woman. Queerness and intersectionality. Black women are the one who came up with this notion of intersectionality. And when you talk about Black feminism today, you really talk about this particular theory. The third wave feminists also reject heterosexuality as normal. They say that it was imposed by white males. There's no reason to think that people should be heterosexual. They call that heteronormativity, and for them this is really a bad thing. We should all be free to embrace and explore our sexuality as we please. Again, remember that everything is fluid, so pretty much everything goes. Of course, this is all. I'm just telling you what they're saying, and then we can, of course, interrogate this from an Afrocentric standpoint, and we will. In that system, the third wave feminism, failure to embrace homosexuality is automatically decried as homophobia. We know how much pressure Western governments are putting on African governments to accept, to institutionalize gay marriage. I'm glad to see that there's a lot of resistance to this, but this is what they would like to promote, what they are promoting, to men getting married. They think it's cool. That again, with gender fluid, so why not? Huh? Or zoophilia, a woman having a dog as her husband and engaging in sexual acts with her dog. When we look at all of this, they engage in all kinds of strange behaviors. We see that there is in those Western societies advanced social disintegration, with family fragmentation, for example, being an example of that. We see, and this is very important, advanced demographic decline leading to shrinking numbers of white people. I will admit this is a great thing, and that I would love for them to continue like that, because that would hopefully give us a break. But this is all the result of their worldview and the practices that they push, because obviously two men getting married, there would be no child coming out of this. A woman with a dog, nothing will happen, because only two, with only copulation and procreation is only possible, not copulation, but procreation is only possible within the same species. The question for me, it's a very important question, is this what we African people need? Do we need feminism? After I've explained what feminism is, where it came from, where it's going, this obsession with sexual orientation, like, you have to announce what your sexual orientation is it what we need, right? So there are a few critical questions that I would like to ask, given that, as the Honorable Marcus Mosiah told us, that we are at war, and we know we are at war, and we can see evidence of this in the condition that we find ourselves in, regardless of where we are. Can we afford to have a fluid identity? Can we afford to let race go? And the people who are telling us to let racial privileges go, do they say, oh, I'm not white anymore, or I was white yesterday, I'll be white again at 2 p.m., but now it's 10 a.m., I can be white, I don't want to be white, I'm something else, I'm blue? No, of course not. So we don't need a fluid identity. We need a very strong sense of who we are, based again in our history, in our culture, in our biology, of who we are, so we can stand up and fight back. Secondly, there's a question of cultural congruence. Is feminism, with its built-in notion of men as inherently oppressive, compatible with our worldview? Is it true that as African women, we see African men as our enemies? And the answer is, of course, no. Because we know, even when Black men get on our nerves, we know we need them to have children. And so we need to work it out. And we also know that we need African men to raise the children and to build strong communities. That's the third question that I want to raise, and the question that deals with epistemological incarceration. How do we escape conceptual incarceration? What is the price attached to using European theories? And most importantly, can feminism ever be Black or African? The mere fact that we have to prefix feminism, calling it Black feminism, African feminism, just like we talk about Black Marxism or Black anything, is very problematic. And it's an admission that it is not ours, that we are inviting ourselves into something that was never meant for us. And that's humiliating in many ways. It speaks of intellectual laziness to me, because putting Black in front of it, whether it's feminism, Marxism, psychology, sociology, doesn't mean that there is any epistemic transformation that makes it ours. I just want to remind us, and we need to keep that in mind, that as far as we are concerned as African people, and so for Afrocentrists as well, there is an asymmetrical complementarity between women and men. And we understand that. We've understood this since we've been here on this earth. It takes a woman to make a man, and it takes a man to make a woman. I know feminists would probably be furious, but it's just the reality of it. It's a biological reality that no one can deny. And we African people, we're people of life. We're not a people of nonsense and death. Our purpose in this world is not to oppress, to create chaos, to create confusion. Our purpose is to add to life and to the beauty of life. And so for us, this is very fundamental. even in our spirituality, I can speak about Vodun a little bit. We always see couples, spiritual couples. We have Dambala Wedo and Aida Wedo, the two snakes. We have Metagwe and La Sirene for the ocean, you know? And so we always see this complementarity that is expressed in everything. Male and female complementarity is basic, fundamental, and an imperative for the continuation, the preservation of life. That's just a fact. That's a biological fact. But of course, if you're denying that biology means anything, now remember, it's not because you have a, you know, male genitals that you are miss. It's all insanity. There are problems with, you know, Western feminists and African feminists, and I have here a quote by a sister, Kimball, who says that Western feminists are often troubled that African women take their reproductive tasks seriously, celebrate their ability to give birth, and refuse to subordinate their biological roles to other roles within society. The pro-natal aspect of African culture is reflected in the fact that in many parts of the continent, African women strive to bear and bring to maturity at least 6 children while still being economically active. White women, white feminists don't understand. For them, that's totally horrible, oppressive for a woman to have 6 children, to even want to have children. And so what's the I'll talk about? Came up with this theory. First of all, she said, you know, why don't this so-called Black feminists, African feminists, why don't they come up with their own paradigm? Their own name. White work can simply be adopted or adapted. Why have they done that?
Sorry, Mama.
And this is how she proposed the notion of Afrikan Womanism. That was in the 1990s.
Mama Amma.
Yes.
Sorry, you froze again. Yeah, could you just go back to the slide with Sister Cleonora Hudson Williams? Yeah.
Okay.
And then
here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So Cleonora Hudson Williams asked the question of why, you know, those so-called Black feminists did not come up with their own paradigm, their own name, their own self-definition. Why had they allowed white feminists to convince them that they could simply adopt the concept in terms of white feminism or adapt it a little bit to their needs, but still maintain their identification as feminists when feminism is clearly a Western or white woman's project? So she proposed that Black women create their own name, define themselves and their critical perspectives and agenda in ways that reflect their particular experiences and, very importantly, African culture. The purpose of Afrikan Womanism, Hudson Williams tells us, is to provide a conceptual, emancipatory space in which Black women can themselves theorize their own existence, affirm their racial identity. You see, it's very important, a racial identity, and understand themselves as having agency and power, meaning that we can do things and we've always done things anyway. Feminism, Hudson Williams insists, cannot serve the purpose of Black women, right? Because again, of its origin, because it carries Western values and attitudes, and again, it pushes the agenda of white women, while Black women, you know, we have our own issues. And so why I'm using a few quotes from African Melanated Womanism. That's the latest version of her book, came out in 2019. She says that the key to the true meaning of African womanism is its mandate for inclusion of the whole family, men included, while highlighting also the very presence and role of the African womanist in concert with her male companion in the ongoing cooperative struggle against racial dominance. So the emphasis here is men and women together fighting against a common enemy, which is white racial domination. And the emphasis also is on the family, not just the individual woman standing up and doing her thing, but the whole family, men, women, and children. And then she has this list of 18 characteristics of an African womanist. She said she's a self-namer. She doesn't let other people give her names. She defines herself. She's family-centered. She works in concert with the male in the liberation struggle, because that is the ultimate objective, the liberation of Black people. She's genuine in sisterhood. She's strong. She's whole. She's authentic. She's a flexible role player. She's respected. She's recognized. Spiritual. She's male compatible, meaning that she's not gay. She's respectful of elders. She's adaptable. She's ambitious, mothering, and nurturing. She said, this is what a strong Black woman, a woman, an African woman who is in the business of building a strong African nation, these are the characteristics, these are the qualities that she should display. She doesn't need to call herself a feminist. That has nothing to do with her. But she has, again, to emphasize the need to be side by side with men and fight for the liberation of African people. So I want to end with a few pictures that I find very beautiful, very powerful, again, that illustrates must raise children and continue to spread life and light in the world. And that is together that we will uphold Africa and put Africa back on her feet. Thank you very much. Asante sana.
All right, Tendamwari Garvey lives, Mosiah lives, giving thanks for that Mambo Ama Mazama. We appreciate that presentation right there with the appetite beautifully. And I'm sure we're going to continue that in the Q&A to come. Right, I'm going to bring forward Mama Kai now. Mama Kai, are you ready? Mic is muted.
Oh.
Tenamwari?
Tenamwari. Garvey lives.
Right,
Mosiah lives. Tenamwari. Let me first say Tatenda, Medase, Papa, Mama, Mambo, Ama, for excellent presentation today. Really just exuding the beauty of African womanhood, African spirituality, and all of Africa's glory. So we give thanks and praises for your presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Regai mazui andina taura nepfungwa zemumu yumangu senziko nemimwari. May the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Mwari, O Jah of our creation. Tendai Mwari. The words Tendai Mwari mean be thankful unto the Creator. Royal elders, queens and kings, princes and princesses of great Mama Africa, I bring greetings in the most precious, powerful and bountiful name of our motherland, Alkebu-Lan, in the spirits of our most gracious ancestors, and in a prayer for oneness, hope, and prosperity for all our people on the face of Mother Earth. Tendai Mwari. Sisters and brothers, I give thanks and praises for your participation today in one of our Mosiah sessions, where we're focusing on African womanhood. And we're also looking at and comparing that to feminism and its relevance in our lives. The Mambo Ama has given a nice comprehensive broad exposure on this subject, and so I'm not necessarily looking to repeat anything, but I might say a few things that, you know, may overlap. But I really want to focus on how do we actualize this, because when we're talking about African womanhood, we are talking about what is it that we have to do to represent that. But before I do that, before I go into the main body of my message, I also want to bring honor to the spiritual leader of the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, Brother Leader Mbandaka, who has made this vision possible. He's inspired by the words of our eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and the eminent prophet and king, Omowale Malcolm X. This season of Mosiah, where we celebrate and honor 31 days of observance of the life and the legacy of this great prophet. And you cannot honor Papa Garvey and the UNIA without honoring the women. The women are integral to the development and the growth and the magnanimous vision and legacy that has been laid down. I also bring greetings from the Alkebu-Lan family who are tuned in today, and somebody very special who we lost at the early part of this year in March, Sister Nkechi Ode. Sister Nkechi Ode gave 17 years of her life to the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement. She didn't give it just as a foot soldier, but she gave it also as somebody who didn't just talk, but she walked. In what I'm saying, brothers and sisters, anything she demanded of us, she always strived to manifest it. And so her loss has had, it's like a big hole in our hearts at the moment, coming to terms with that reality. You kind of feel that what are we going to do about Sister Nkechi? You know, she's a big loss to the Pan-African community, because other individuals and other organizations speak about how she impacted on their organization or them as individuals. Sister Nkechi was a senior officer, and most of her work centered around education and pastoral work with the members. We also send our condolences also to her son, Jawanza, and her grandchildren, Princess Larissa and Prince Jelani. Sisters and brothers, when we're talking about African womanhood and we're talking about feminism and we're talking about African spirituality, I think for the most part, we see African spirituality, African spiritual traditions as backward, as archaic, holding the African woman back. You know, you can hear people make comments like, you know, we need to look at African spirituality, but just take aspects of it and throw away the bits that we don't need. I don't even think we're in a position to even do that half the time, because the most of our thought process is very European. And so anything we're throwing away, we might be throwing away the good part and think, so we are throwing away the bad part. And anything that, as far as I'm concerned, that is the bad part is not our tradition, because there's manifestations of European and Arab traditions intermingled in what we now call African spirituality. So even when you go into Mama Africa, on the motherland, you will see practices, and you'll see within those practices, you'll see European and Arab religions intertwined, and we call it African spirituality. And we say, oh, we have to get rid of this bit and that bit. But, you know, sometimes we've had to take on different aspects of these traditions for survival. And at different stages, we think that these traditions are our own. But as we embark on this noble and righteous cause of putting back the puzzle pieces in terms of mending our lives and healing our lives and reconnecting ourselves to the motherland and mother father principles, we don't have to worry, because everything will play out, everything will pan out. But we have to embark on it. It's not going to happen by osmosis. And so I just want to read, sisters and brothers, from a few texts. The Kuraira, which is, I guess, another, a best way to explain would be a catechism. In the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, we take our children through a rites of passage into manhood and womanhood. And we do that because our ancestors told us that's what we have to do. If we want strong men and strong women, when we look back in history, we're so proud. We look at how strong these men and women are, and we say, yes, we're going to repeat this, or we want to build on this. Well, it didn't just happen just like that. There's a process to everything. As Mama Marimba Annie tells us that in our tradition, everything is through a process. It doesn't just happen by a click of a finger. And so because we've been taken away from our tradition and been robbed of our history, we have to look back and sometimes use our own intuition into putting things back in place. And so in the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, as we're taking our children through their Kuraira, one of the things that we teach them is about the role of man and the role of woman. And I just want to read what is the nature and divine purpose of man and the nature, well, not so much of man, but more so the nature and divine purpose of woman. So I've lost my page. Okay, here we are. And this is what our children learn. And it says, the nature of woman is like the nature of the earth. For like the earth, her being contains the cosmic egg, essential for the conception, bearing and bringing forth of life. Like the earth receives the germ of life from the heavens, so does woman receive the germ of life from man. As life germinates within the break forth from the sacred womb of Mother Earth, so does life germinate within and breaks forth from the sacred womb of woman. Thus, woman is by nature the gestator or the conceiver, bearer, and bringer forth of life. Now, that is really, really important, sisters and brothers, to us to understand. Because when we are looking at, Mama Rimba spoke about feminism, and it is really an alien concept to us. It is diametrically opposed to anything African. It was designed by women to, as a social and political movement, really for white women to demand equality with their men, have equal footing with their men. It's not even saying that they even want to break down the system per se. And Mama took us through some very important, what she called waves. It's funny how we're talking about waves at this time, you know, with the coronavirus, the pandemic, where they talk about the first wave, we're going to have the second wave and what have you. But feminism has gone through a number of waves, as Mama broke it down to us just now. And the movement, the feminist movement, was never intended for us. That's what we have to realize. It was never intended to suit or to fix the condition that we find ourselves in. It was never intended to address the needs of African women. It was solely intended for European women. And like Mama said, in the third wave, we are now trying to stretch the feminism so we can fit it somehow to suit our condition. And we don't need to do that. We have our own spiritual and cultural traditions. And if we look at those cultural traditions, we will realize how empowered we were and are as women. How all our societies were matrifocal, matrilineal. Everything came through the lineage of the woman. We had women deities. Women were hailed at the highest level when we're talking about our gods and goddesses. We are talking about Ma'at, the female principle, truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, reciprocity, and order. We're talking about goddess Osset. We talk about our goddess Nana Me from Ghana. We talk about our goddesses. My mind has slipped me at the moment, but we're talking about some of our goddesses like Oshun, our queen mothers, the Santi Hima, the queen mother. When you look at African spiritual tradition, next to every African goddess is an African god. And so we don't have to go any further. Just go to our traditions. Look at our traditions. And when we understand those traditions, Mama just spoke about, even in Europe today, the European women, when they go to Africa and the Caribbean and they set up these women feminist groups to plead with the African women that you are so oppressed by your African man, and in Europe we do this, and in Europe we do that, and we have the vote, and we can wear what we want, and so and so. But the European woman is very, very much still oppressed in her own country. She's so busy in Africa. She's so busy in the Caribbean. Why don't she stay in her own business and sort out her own business? Because right now they still have European women selling cars and selling toothbrush and shampoo half naked, and they're still using the European body as sexual objects. The European woman, as Mama spoke about, her pay is still very little to nothing. Even in their government, there are very few women MPs. In their present system, they've only had 2 women prime ministers. So you don't have to come to Mama Africa to tell us how to empower ourselves, how to release the shackles of patriarchy. When we release the shackles of European spiritual orders, and Arab spiritual orders, religions, when we release ourselves of European political systems, like so-called democracy, when we release ourselves of European social systems and their and Marxism and communism and all the other isms and schisms, when we release ourselves of that, then sisters and brothers, it's only natural that our true spiritual traditions will come to the fore, and we will just automatically take up our natural roles. And we have seen this, sisters and brothers. So we were not talking about something that happened in the past, because we have a tendency of saying that as well. That was back then, this is now. Well, we have been using Marxism, feminism, capitalism, communism. We've been using all these isms and schisms, Taoism and Buddhism. We've been using all of them, and it has not benefited us. There is nowhere in the African world when we pick up these political systems or these social systems or these religious systems, we're still at the bottom of the pile. So, all right, let's try something else. Let's try something that is ours. And so, sisters and brothers, let's look. I think one of the greatest examples in modern times, when we see African women brought to the fore through our own efforts, is when we look at the UNIAACL, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and the African Communities League. There is no greater embodiment, there is no greater example of that. Now, I can take it before I go and start to break down some of the roles that the women took and so forth. I'm just going to move slightly back of some great women in our traditions. When we have had to fight against European and Arab invasion in Mama Africa, great women came to the fore. Most of us have heard of or know her of Queen Yasantewa of Ghana. She led, with women by her side, armies against the British and was successful. You hear about Queen Mama Nzinga of the Congo, or Angola now. Queen Mama Nzinga, she's just one of my favorites. She, alongside her sisters, fought the Portuguese for 52 of her 81 years. She led armies successfully. She was a great strategist, diplomat. There's so much I can say about her, but time doesn't allow. You know, I'm saying that even when we are in the worst of times, even when we are under the greatest amount of attack, as women, we have been able to rise up and just take our roles and seriously and move our future forward. Queen Mbuyana of Zimbabwe, these great women had to fight against armies, guns, bombs, invasion, maiming and killing. They had to lead our people. And so, sisters and brothers, and sisters in particular, we don't have to go and look at Emily Pankhurst and use it as examples of how we can, empower ourselves. We have these great queens as living examples of women rising up under very, horrific conditions. And so I'm going to, as I said, bring us up to the 1920s. Well, let's start with the inception of the Garvey movement. At the inception of the Garvey movement, sisters, we had Papa Garvey, and one of his first members was Amy Ashwood Garvey, a young sister. She was 17 at the time, who was later on to become his first wife. At the inception of the movement, Mama Amy Ashwood Garvey institutionalized what she then said was women, each branch must have a woman vice president and a woman on the board. And this was throughout the organization. Mama Amy Ashwood was a true example herself. She was a great debater. That was one of the things that inspired Papa Garvey when he met her. Her prowess, her confidence, and she, ability to argue some really important political debates. And the first two that both of them was arguing was whether women should have the same rights as men. The Mama Amy Ashwood Garvey sat on the board of the Black Star Line Shipping Corporation. She led the women's social clubs. She also set up the food distribution and co-op, and a myriad of different roles and responsibilities that she had. The organization did not shy away from women taking the lead. And I'm using this example because you got to realize at that time, as Mama Mambo Amma shared with us already, is that European women didn't even have the vote in a lot of European countries. And so 1920, I think, in the US, 28 in the UK, I think she said 65 in France, 70 something in Portugal. You know, and they're so busybody in our countries. You know, sisters, we have a great history. And so our sisters in the UNAA, as I said, are living examples of that. These sisters, I'm going to name a few of them. Mama Henrietta Vinton Davis. Mama Henrietta Vinton Davis held one of the highest roles in the organization of the UNIA. She was international organizer. She traveled not just through the US, but around the African world with delegations. She even led a delegation to Mama Africa, Liberia. She, at a number of different times, she was international organizer or national organizer. Madam Demina also was a national organizer for the organization. I'm saying this, sister, but we got to understand, because at that time, women didn't even have control. In European countries, they had no control over their children. They had no rights over the home they were living in. If they were, they couldn't even divorce their husbands. If their husbands wanted to divorce them, they had, and then we had the UNIA that had women leading. Lillian Galloway, she was head of the printing press, totally unheard of, at age 30 in Harlem. You had women, they were running the millineries, hat making factories. They were running laundry service. They were running restaurants. They made the clothes for the organization. They ran the Women Motor Corps, which was military wing of the organization. They set up schools for our young people. Sisters, when we look at our history, we will realize that the examples are already there for us. We don't have to look at anywhere else. We don't have to look at other people's philosophies or religions to get us through this particular situation that we're in, because it's nothing that we created. We are victims of patriarchy, and so are our men. We are victims of a patriarchal society, and we see the evidence of it. But so are our men. The biggest auxiliary in the UNIA was the Black Cross nurses. Over 60% of the organization were women. Now, I'm saying that was totally unheard of at that time. You've got to understand. You've got to understand also that if our men are such oppressive, demonic beings, as they are portrayed in the media constantly, day in, day out, there's no way that our women would be able to function and lead the organization in that way. I think it is just natural for our African men to see African women in those leadership positions. I think it just harmonizes with us, because that is our nature as men and women. We know our roles, we know our responsibilities. And Mama spoke about that now everything is fluid. You know, there's no, everything is it's up for question. We shouldn't just accept things as they are. I agree, we shouldn't accept things as they are. But we had solid institutions, spiritual institutions, like Mama is part of Voodoo institutions, right? African spiritual institutions that was a foundation for anything else that was to grow out of our societies. And at the center was the African goddess in that institution, because she laid the foundation for the societies. And so when we see the UNIA and the great works, I can't leave out Mama Amy Jakes Garvey, the second wife of Papa Garvey. And she had a very crucial role in the organization. She was just like Omowale Malcolm X's mother. How can I forget her name again? Omowale Malcolm X's mother's name. Oh my gosh, it's totally gone. It'll come back. Shakara, you're gonna.
Yeah, Louise Little.
Louise Little. Yeah, Mama Louise Little. How can I forget that? Mama Louise Little. These women were secretaries of the organization. Mama Amy Jakes. So that's why Papa Omowale Malcolm X became who he was. His father was branch president. His mama was branch secretary for the organization. She wrote articles for the UNIA. I'm saying that, brothers and sisters, because Mama Remember Ami talks about processes, that things don't just happen just like that. In the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, we have set up institutions, because without institutions and programs, there is no continuity. We can't just, hear today how you feel like it's not going to work for us. We're not going to free ourselves like that. We need institutions. This society runs an institution. This is just like a smoke screen that they're giving us. Sorry, I just kind of gone off a little bit. It's like a smoke screen telling everything's fluid. That is just that they've got the general population with some nonsense, because their societies are run on institutions. It's maintained on institutions, and nations, they come together and reinforce their political and their religious institutions. That's how they are built. And so going back to the UNIA, Mama Amy Jakes Garvey, she, the second wife of Papa Garvey, she also was on the board of the Black Star Line Shipping Corporation, and a number of boards of the organization. When Papa Garvey was incarcerated, she more or less ran the organization single-handedly. We've got to understand really what was taking place here. Mama Amy Jakes Garvey also gave us a philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey, volumes 1, 2, and 3. What she did when he was in prison was collate all his work. He asked her to pull his work together, because he didn't know if he was going to even come out alive. So, future generations will have in their hands the guide to lead us into to victory. And so she pulled all these 3 volumes together. She said when she finished, she was 7 stones. These are women with tenacity, brothers and sisters. These are great women that we don't always speak about. But when we're talking about empowering women, that's where we need to go. We don't need to go to feminism. We don't need to look at the suffragettes, Emily Pankhurst, and we only look at these because you say you can't surmount what you don't know. So we look at it for study purposes, but not to empower us, not to inspire us, not to carve our lives around. Because as Mama said, that feminism is an antagonistic philosophy. It's coming up against European male chauvinistic patriarchal society. That's what it's about. And that is not what we are. Complementary. The African man and woman are about complementarity, coming together, the African man and woman coming together and leading from the front. So we have to understand that to get involved in feminism is only actually bringing us back. Now, I know that sometimes, African men, they see feminism as a threat to the African man. It's a threat. African patriarchy is a threat to the African man. European patriarchy, is a threat to the African man. because that is what has been incarcerating our men. It is that philosophy that has been imprisoning our men, killing our men, making sure that our men commit suicide. The highest level of suicide are African men, mental breakdown, you name it, brothers and sisters. And even when our men are outside of prison, they're not in mental institutions, and they seem to be functioning, sometimes they're not even really functioning. That is under European male patriarchy. So when our men are fighting feminism, we must use the same fervor to fight European patriarchy, because it is destroying us as a people. It's destroying the African family, because the African man coming together with the African woman is about building of the African family. The African family needs to be strengthened. The African family builds institutions. It builds nations. And it builds communities, which then builds nations. The survival of the African race is based on the survival of the African woman and the African man coming together in harmony. It's not a choice, brothers and sisters. It's not about, well, you know, you can love anybody. You can love anybody, yeah, you can love anybody. But first love yourself. First love yourself. When you love yourself, you only want to look for something that looks like you. You only want to perpetuate something that looks like you. You only want to see something that looks like you when there is self-love. And because there isn't self-love, you see us trying to mimic looking like someone else, or choosing partners that look the total opposite to us. And yet we say somehow that we are making our own individual choices. We're not in a position to make individual choices. We've got to make collective choices. We've got to make collective decisions in the best interest of our race and our nation. When we are, Brother Leader teaches that when an African man and woman comes together, we do family counseling. And one of the things that he always speaks about is that when we're in relationships, a lot of the time we enter it with our European minds, seeing what we can get out of it. So we enter that relationship with what we think is going to best suit us. We don't go into the relationship with, or both of us, a lot of the time don't go into these relationships with saying what we can put in. Because if both people are putting in, then both people will receive. So sometimes you have one person putting everything in the basket and the other person just taking out. And so that is us. That is us, brothers, on a macro level and a micro level. And so the African family is important. The African community will not be developed unless we develop the African family, strengthen the African family. And that can only be with the coming together of man and woman. And that coming together, it can't just be solely based on your personal emotions. It can't. Because if that was the case, we wouldn't even be here today. You see, we've had to do lots of things sometimes that you can't even mention out of your mouth for survival. We've had to do lots of things, brothers and sisters, for the survival of the African race. And sometimes those decisions that we make is for the betterment of going forward. And so coming back to whether feminism is of any use to the African man or woman, because I know these days they've got a lot of men saying, I'm a feminist. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. You know, I'm a feminist. Well, it has never served us. It will not serve us. We can take it, we can reshape it, just like we've done with socialism and Marxism and Leninism. We have our own spiritual traditions. We have our own communal orders. We have our own way of life. We have our rites of passage. Our rites of passage is fundamental and key. And that's why, if we understand rites of passage, we wouldn't be talking about gay, lesbian, transgender, because it doesn't have a place within the rites of passage system. Because the rites of passage system is only bringing the African man and woman, raising that child to become a husband, a good wife, a good mother, and a good father. That is all. You wasn't going to become a good. Wasn't about marrying another woman. It wasn't preparing you to marry another woman, or two women marrying. It never prepared us for two men to marry. It just didn't happen. The man and the woman. And so that's why, you know, when people say, oh, they've been to Africa and they found this word that means gay or some nonsense. You don't have to, you can go and find anything you want to find. You can go to Africa and find, you know, we've been under the oppression of the Arab for 1400 years and 500 years under the European. You're going to see a whole heap of madness on the African continent. You're going to see some really weird and wonderful things taking place there. But so you don't have to go and tell me you went there and you saw this and you saw that. You don't have to do that, brothers and sisters. Go straight to the tradition. Go straight to the source. You go to the source and the source will direct you. It will make it clear that we are a nature-based people. We believe in nature. Nature is a manifestation of everything in creation. We are part of creation. We are not against creation. We're not fighting creation. We harmonize with creation. We embrace creation. We embrace motherhood. One of the greatest roles you will ever carry in your life. One of, you know, you're talking about a mother is a birth in the next generation. She's raising, you know, another generation. So we are in harmony with nature. And if you're in harmony with nature, you cannot accept anything other than African spiritual traditions as the only vehicle that is going to free us today, sisters and brothers. Papa Garvey, I'm going to finish with the words of Papa Garvey because he is a great embodiment of an African man who embraced strong African women. He came from a strong African mother. He had a strong African sister, Indiana, his mother, Mama Sarah Garvey. That is his foundation. And so he wasn't threatened by strong African women. He was empowered, he was moved, and he was inspired. And if we want strong African men today, sisters, we're going to have to be strong African women. We've got to inspire our young girls to become strong African girls. We have to inspire our young men to look up and be proud of strong African women. Papa Garvey says, the world today is indebted to us for the benefits of civilization. They stole our arts and sciences from Africa, so why should we be ashamed of ourselves? Rise, you mighty African people, for you can accomplish whatever you will. Tendai Mwari. Garvey lives!
Garvey lives!
Mosiah lives!
Mosiah lives!
Yele! Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari, give thanks for that, Mama Kai. Adding purpose and speaking truth to power. We give thanks for that context there, especially addressing the role of the women of the UNIA, kings and queens. We give thanks, we give thanks, we give thanks. All right, kings and queens, the hour you've been waiting for is here. We're going to share the link out right about now. We're taking questions, we're taking comments, we're taking additions to the knowledge and the information that have been shared. We are also receiving respectful challenges if anybody does have them, you know what I mean? So if you are watching the chat right now, you will see the link in the chat. Please come through with your mic muted and I'll get to you in order of your entrance into the panel, and you'll be able to interact with Mama Kai and Mama Mazama dutifully. And to get the conversation flowing, I'm going to ask a couple questions whilst you all are coming through, kings and queens. And my first is really directed at both mamas, in the sense of the fact that when we look at everything that you have just said, the reality is, and I think Mama Kai alluded to this, is, that was back then, this is now. And the general perception is that Black liberation movements address male issues, yeah? They don't address women issues, okay? The ideologies that inform the activities of Black power movements, Black organizations, are designed to empower men while neglecting the issues that are specific to African women. And so my question is, what is it about African-centeredness or Afrocentricity or African fundamentalism, you know, Black nationalist thought and action that speaks to organically addressing the role of women. Where can African women find themselves organically being addressed? Yes, being elevated, being seen. Yes, within our African-centered or Afrocentric or Black nationalist schools of thought and organization and movements.
Mama, please go ahead.
Sorry, Mama, your mic is muted. 1 second, let me unmute you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. You know, they say that actions speak louder than words, and at Afrocentricity International, we're very much aware, you know, the fact that African women have not necessarily always been given the place that we should have. A lot of it because of the influence of patriarchy, like Mama Kaya was saying. And Afrocentricity International was actually created by a man and a woman. We did it together in tandem, Dr. Asante and myself, in 2011, 2012. And we also made it a point to have a female as head of the organization. And I think that the AI is probably the only Pan-African international organization that has a woman as at its head. So we, first, that's the praxis that we present, the model that we present. When we look at our divisions throughout the world, I can honestly say that I prefer to have female shinoutis, female heads, because I think that women bring something, not that men don't have it, but I think it's time for women, African women's voice to be heard more loudly, more clearly, especially because we're talking about rebuilding our communities. So that entails, you know, families, children, and women are always at the center of this, you see. I was just talking to a sister this morning in Rwanda. She wants to represent the organization in Rwanda. And she was telling me about the work she does with children. And I was very inspired by that and very pleased. So there are places, you know, where women are totally welcome and promoted to the fullest capacity. And I think that's very important indeed. But we must always keep in mind, we're not competing with men. You see, we're always together, doing this together, because there's so much at stake for all of us, not just women, but for the whole Black community, African community.
Tenamore. Yes, Tenamore. Yeah, I think as Mama, give thanks, Mama, for your comments there. And, you know, I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. In the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, we've always tried to encourage our sisters to take up leading roles. As you know, sometimes because of more so to do with how we have internalized European patriarchy, how we lack confidence in ourselves to even take up some of those roles. But I have found that from my experience, and I've been in this thing since about age 16, I'm now 55. And I have found that that is not taken away from the fact that we do have difficulties in organizations with some of our men trying to act out some of the European patriarchal mentality. But I have found that women automatically just take up roles. And I remember one of the courses on our induction program we were running, I was leading the induction program. The person assisting was also leading. So I was the induction head, and the assistant was a female as well. And I can't remember, there was another sister in a role in the group of the new inductees. And this brother started saying, okay, right, so where's the role for the women? You know, and I was like, well, I mean, there's two of us sitting in front of you. So sometimes things are there happening in front of your eyes, but you can't see it, you don't recognize it, because we're always looking at creating antagonism where there isn't any. And I find that women, and as Mama said, it's very important to have women heads. I think it is extremely important to have women heads, especially when you're laying the foundation, because our organizations, our spiritual organizations, like the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, revolves around spiritual deities. And so when we're revolving around spiritual deities and spiritual systems, which are, you know, female orientated, then it is only natural that women will come to the fore. I think sometimes as sisters, we don't take up the opportunity. We become shy to taking up certain roles and responsibilities. Sometimes it's because the roles and responsibilities that we do have, i.e., primarily because we are carers, the main carers of our children, it does not enable us to like move around and get around and take up certain roles and responsibilities. But I think there's something that we got to have to facilitate within the organization. That there are going to be younger women who do not have children, that, you know, they're encouraged to take up certain roles. And there are going to be mature women who have now finished giving birth to children, who are now able to take up very senior roles. And I think that and it has to permeate throughout the organization. Everybody has to understand and realize that that is our tradition. That's how we do things. I read a book by Nathan and Julia Hare. I think it's called the Endangered Black Family.
Endangered Black Family, yeah.
That's it, the Endangered Black Family. Yeah. And in there are some statistics, and they highlight that during the 60s, now the 60s, we have to understand it was the revolutionary 60s, we call it, because it wasn't just one country, it was over the entire world. You're talking about the Caribbean, there were uprisings taken back of their countries, Africa, the US, and both in their research, they said domestic violence was at an all-time low. And so we have to understand within black communities, the domestic violence at a whole all-time low. So we have to realize that what is it then about the liberation movement, how it impacts on the African man, the African woman, the African family, that something as you know, demonic as domestic violence would be at an all-time low. So the Black liberation movement has been integral, I think, and from my research, in enhancing the African woman and empowering the African woman. Tenamari.
Tenamari, Mama Kai, give thanks for that. Don't worry, Sister Ife. I'm about to serve your request very shortly. But I do want to ask another related follow-up question. You know, there are some people that are going to be thinking, Mama Mazama, Mama Kai, that all this talk that you're giving is very good, yeah. But the reality is that in our own communities right now today, African women are experiencing some harsh, extremely harsh treatment at the hands of African men around the world. Yeah, patriarchy seems to have been adopted within our community, and so whereas the African man may not be able to exercise patriarchy in the world, a kind of pseudo patriarchy, yeah, has developed in the African community in terms of how we relate to African women, in terms of hypersexualization, gender-based violence, and other forms of oppression, especially on the African continent, yeah, and these kinds of things. And so this all sounds, what you're saying sounds good, but at least they will say the feminists are trying to address those issues directly. They're out there in front with an ideology and ideas that is designed to empower women. Where are you, Afrocentric women, yeah, with similar vigor, yeah, ideological thrust, and organizations that are addressing these issues in the same way? Some people are going to be thinking that.
Well, you know, obviously we don't have the same vigor because there are not as many of us, you know, and there are not so many of us because we know the anti-African propaganda that we're subjected to on a daily basis. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to organize, you know, with Afro-Centrism International in particular, we try to really have, you know, divisions and really help assist our people really become African again, you know, which means embrace certain cultural values. And one critical such value is the respect of women, you know. This is not an easy situation, you know, by any means necessary, but by any account. But we still have to engage in this conversation. You know, is feminism the way to go? And once, you know, let's say we've got ourselves together, are we going to be anti-African men? You see, how far will we go with that? So obviously, the women, Black women who are being abused have to be protected. There's no question about that. But the men have to be educated, and the women too, because, you know, it's a two-way thing as well. It's not just the men who've been influenced by patriarchy, but the women as well. So we have a lot of work to do, but we must do it. We must do it because, again, feminism is not an option for us.
Tendamore. Yes, I mean, I agree with what Mama said. I've just said, I think also, I hear some of these voices saying that we're not dealing with the day-to-day reality. Well, that's their perception, but that's not the reality. The reality is that, like Mama said, we're all affected by patriarchy. We're all affected by the society, and it manifests itself in different ways. Our numbers are smaller in terms of trying to address it, but we're trying to return to the way. And in returning to the way and using our own traditions and recent examples, we would be able to address it. And so I think sometimes what we're looking at micro situations and against a global media that promotes European tradition and European paradigms as the way forward for everything, as the answer to everything. So they call it things like it's international. You know, this is the international perspective, which basically is a European perspective. And so I don't know these individuals, mostly women, I would suspect, who would say we're dealing with domestic violence. Well, we're trying to deal with domestic violence as well. We don't have all the resources, and we certainly don't have all the airplay, but we're trying to deal with domestic violence. What we're saying is we're not going to have Europeans come in and dictate to us how we're supposed to deal with domestic violence. We have our own ways of dealing with things. And so you're not going to come in here and dominate and tell us how to do it. And that's our challenge. And for some of those sister and brothers that are outside of organization, they need to join an organization. That's our biggest challenge right now. We can't do it as individuals. You make some impression, but if you're talking about really addressing things nationally, we have to address the education of our children. We've got to address the income, economics, housing. All of these things have to be addressed. All of these things has an impact on what happens in the home, in the family, in the relationships. All of these things have an impact. We're not going to do it by ourselves as individuals. So I would just urge sisters and brothers who are genuinely committed to trying to address some of the social issues that are affecting our communities to join an organization. Tendamore.
I give thanks for that, Mama Kai. Kings and Queens, the link, if you want to come on and interact with Mama Mazama and Mama Kai, feel free to click the link in the description where you see Alkebu-Lan way. There's a link for you to join us live and you can come and ask a question. Giving thanks for your brother Omawale for that notification there. We appreciate that. No problem, my brother. But yes, Kings and Queens, if you'd like to come through and join us, feel free to do so. I'm going to follow. Well, I had already had it prepared still, but Sister Ife is looking for some quotes, yeah, from some of our great mamas, and I'm gonna go to Mama Amy Jakes Garvey, because she's got a lot of stuff to say, Kings and Queens.
Oh yeah,
what's it called? And it's housed in well, one of the books that is housed in is this one called "The Women in the Garvey Movement" by Queen Mother.
Yeah.
Give thanks, yeah. And I appreciate this book. But not only does she have a lot to say, she's got a lot to say on the issue of woman leadership, and a few harsh words for us as the brothers, kings and queens. And some of you are going to be familiar with this, and I'm realizing that a lot of our feminist brothers and sisters are attempting to kind of reclaim Mama Amy Jakes, and in this particular quote in particular. But we'll go forward, and I'll get a reflection from Mama Mazama and Mama Kai in relation to these two quotes. Yeah, the first one is taken from an essay that she wrote in 1925. Yeah, it's called "Women as Page in that book is number 30. Yeah, and well, I'm going to read from page number 31. Yeah, and it says, "Be not discouraged, black women of the world, but push forward regardless of the lack of appreciation shown you. A race must," and when she says lack of appreciation, she's talking about on the part of African men. Yeah, you have to be clear about that. Yeah, a race must be saved, a country must be redeemed, and unless you strengthen the leadership of vacillating Negro men, we will remain marking time until the yellow race gains leadership of the world, and we be forced into subserviency under them or extermination. We are tired of hearing Negro men say there is a better day coming, while they do nothing to usher in the day. We are becoming so impatient that we are getting in the front ranks and serve notice on the world that we will brush aside the halting, cowardly Negro men, and with prayer on our lips and arms prepared for any fray, we will press on and on until victory is ours. Africa must be for Africans, and Negroes everywhere must be independent. God being our guide. Mr. Blackman, watch your step. Ethiopia's queens will reign again, and her Amazons protect her shores and people. Strengthen your shaking knees and move forward, or we will displace you and lead on to victory and to glory. Yeah, that's such is the wisdom of Mama Amy Jakes Garvey. Hail to the power of the word.
Hail to the power of the word.
Garvey lives. Mosiah lives. Yeah, and so obviously, as a man, you're either going to feel very uncomfortable when you hear that, or spurred into action. And I guess the latter is what she was trying to inspire. I get a reflection from the mamas after this particular quote as well, because this is a more somber reflection, but one that I think we need to take note of. Mama Kai, for your sake, it's page 52, and it's entitled "Listen, Women." Yeah, published in 1927. It says, "Negro women are the acknowledged burden bearers of their race. Whether this is due to the innate laziness of Negro men or their lack of appreciation for the noble women, we are not quite sure. Perhaps both these reasons are contributing factors, yet the results are the same: an overburdened womanhood and a backward race. We hope some of our male readers will, in defense of their sex, supply us with a plausible excuse. That is, if they can summon enough energy to do so. With Negro women in this important yet unenviable position, she should be careful in keeping." Sorry, I'm noticing that something's happened with Mama Amma's connection, so I don't wanna. All right, I'll keep an eye on it for now, but I'll continue reading.
Women and what we want.
One second, right. Mabakai? Sorry, your mic is on. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah. Right. With Negro, where was I? Yes. With Negro women in this important yet unenviable position, she should be careful in keeping pace with daily events and training her mind to cope with situations and problems. Her tasks become greater as the cycle of civilization shifts nearer to Africa and nationalism and self-determination, the rallying cry from the East. Yeah. And she goes on, and she, in fact, for the sake of brevity, I'll read one more section from this same article. He says, "Mr. Negro, who has no love for his woman, loses the incentive to achieve, and the race is much the poorer because of his slothfulness. Telling him to go and get diamonds and adorn his woman, he will readily tell you that he is going to risk his life. He isn't, sorry, going to risk his life for her. Yet his dependency on white people makes him every minute of his life at a risk. He is always out of a job because he is too lazy to go and make a job for himself. He prefers to hang around the white man's factory doors begging for a job, and oftentimes get what he deserves, a kick. Yeah, so I'll leave that there for now. Yeah, but how do we right contextualize, receive the words of our mama in the, and by the way, I don't want to reduce the words of Mama Amy Jacques Garvey to just that. Mama Amy Jacques Garvey wrote on a brevity of issues, yeah, eloquently as well. So I do want to make that point, but because this is the subject today, I do want to address our guest speakers to those particular quotes and see what their reflections are.
Okay, Tinamori.
Tinamori.
Yes. No, I mean, Mama Amy Jacques Garvey, as Papa Garvey, every now and again would spank us. And she quite rightly spanked the men when they were just not, she was obviously totally frustrated. You know, somebody get to a point where like, Lord of God, I must see. What's wrong with them? You know, she's got to a point where it was like, you know, you're either going to do something for something to eat. And if you ain't going to prepare to do it, and mommy, you know, when we're going to do it, we're going to take the lead. You know, you have to be in shame then if you're not going to do what needs to be done. This is not unique because, what's her name? Mama Yasantewa. She also said, if the men of Ashanti will not fight, we the women will. When she realized that the men were ever felt depleted, they've been fighting for a long time, they just didn't probably have it in them. She led them to victory. They got up behind her, you know. So I think what Mama Amy Jacques was basically saying, look, the time is now. We need to be free. You know, for whatever reason, you have become weak or you've become fearful or you don't feel you can, you know, stand up to this beast. Well, we're going to step forward. We're going to lead. You know, you're not going to block us. It's going to happen. We're going to be a free people. And it's very important we listen to what she's saying. She's not fighting her men down. She's not saying we're going to show you how better we are. What she's saying is this is about the freedom of the African race. This is about, you know, African sovereignty. We're going to have to lead us into victory. Whatever it takes, she's basically saying, whatever it takes, we are going to have to, if it takes the women to lead us to victory, then so be it. And you have to applaud her for that, Tindamori.
Tindamori. And any reflections on those quotations, Mama Mazama?
Yeah, I missed the second one because I got disconnected, but the first one somehow reminded me of Yasantewa.
Yes.
When the men, you know, would not stand up and refuse to turn in the golden stool to the British commissioner, and that she was so outraged that she assembled an army of women and led, you know, the fight. And I said to myself, you know, this is the same spirit, the same you know, warrior spirit that has been within us African women. Wherever, you know, we are, you know, wherever we are, and we must create institutions that allow us that warrior spirit to come forth, you know. That's very important, but it's there. And I don't think we need to dwell so much on this because for me it's a given that we have that, you know. It's a given. I don't think we should marvel at it. We have it, you know?
Kings and Queens, once again, the link is in the chat. Now, I know, that, you know, like our mamas are answering the questions very, very well, but I am conscious of the fact that I am a brother, and I'd love to hear some reflections from other sisters, as well as brothers, in fact. In fact, when I was asked to chair this session today, I was aware that some people are asking, well, why is a brother going to chair the session on women? And I consider it an honor, Kings and Queens. I think as African men, we should be able to engage with our sisters, our mothers, on issues such as these comfortably. And so I sit here comfortably as the chair between my able mamas, but I'm inviting you on to come and interact with them also, yeah? And so you can do so by hitting the link in the chat or asking a question in the chat. If you don't want to come on and let us hear your voice, you can simply type it in the chat, as some of you have been doing thus far. I'm going to ask another question. There, a sensibility has arisen, yeah, that I have challenged many times, which is that whenever an African woman gets up and raises an issue along the lines of gender within the conscious community, and I use that term loosely, but also the social media community, she's often labeled a feminist. Yes. And which is not necessarily always the case. Yeah. But she's just addressing an issue specific to African women. And so it would seem to suggest that or give the impression that women in Black conscious circles are alienated from addressing their womanhood. Yes. And let's be real now. Is that the case? Yeah. Now we kind of answered this slightly before, but I'm asking it in a more direct way. Is it the case that women within the Black conscious community are often alienated from addressing and raising issues, putting forward the perspective or the woman perspective within media, organizations, and institutions? And what needs to be done proactively on the ground for us to address that situation, if it is indeed the case?
You know, I personally haven't had that experience, so I really cannot say that's the case. You know, maybe because I am mostly among Afrocentrists, where we are particularly, you know, aware that, you know, feminism is not an option for us, and we don't, you know, so that label is not placed on me if I bring up an issue. You know, I'm going to be an African, a womanist, whatever, but I'm not going to be a feminist. Nobody's going to put that label on me. And I have never felt that gender-related issues could not be brought up. I personally don't bring those up too much, precisely because I think that we must deal with the whole community. You know, I never feel very comfortable with conversations that's just centered on women's issues. Because for me, this is just one part of the whole equation, you know? So, and I think that's the way we must approach it, not to silence women, not to make women invisible. I'm a woman, obviously, you know, I'm a mother, so I know that there are issues, but always dealing with them in the context, the broader context of the struggle against, you know, white racism and white racial domination. And seeing the impact, of course, of white racial domination on our men, you know, and being there to support them as well.
Right.
Like we expect them to support us. And if they don't, then, you know, just get them straight. But not a silencing, not a, you know, it's not taboo or anything like that.
All right.
At least not in the circles, you know, not in the Afrocentric circles that I find myself in.
Give facts on Mama Amma. I'm okay?
Tenamore. I mean, I think I understand what Mama is saying in terms of the African-centered circles. I think there is sometimes when certain issues do come up that are very sensitive, like say domestic violence, that there is a tendency sometimes, I wouldn't even say it's a majority of times within the Pan-African circles at all, I wouldn't say that's a majority, to either throw something out that may, you know, you say you're a feminist, that's like a, you know, a curse word. So you throw that, it can shut you up. But I don't think that is common. I don't see that as the main position of when you're in these circles and you raise the issue of women issues. I think our bigger problem is sometimes we don't really understand what the issues are and how they need to be resolved. And as Mama said, there's a holistic approach we have to take to it. I know that there are times when we as women, I mean, in the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, we have what is called a sister circle and a brother circle. The sisters come together to deal with some sisters' issues and to see it from our perspective and look at resolving it from our understanding, our experience. The brothers, they have brother circle. And those things are very important. That's always been part of our tradition. There's time when the elders are separate. There's time when the children are separate. The sisters are separate, the brothers, not so they can fight each other, not that they can overpower each other, but so that they can make themselves better human beings, better men, better women, better, family members. And I think I think it's because we have taken on other people's ideologies and philosophies where these issues become problematic. Because I know amongst the socialists, they will say that the Black woman is going through triple oppression. She's going through oppression because she's working class. She's going through oppression because she's a woman, and she's going through oppression because she is a Black woman. But I've always addressed this, that our Black men are also going through triple oppression. They are going through oppression because they are working class. They are going through oppression because they are Black and men, and because they are Black men. Look what is happening to the African men around the world, And so I think when we see the reality, not somebody else's reality, and try and impose it on our reality, if we look at our reality and what is happening to African men, then that dichotomy is not necessary. We can see how we can strengthen and support each other. But I think you have to institutionalize this. I don't think we can underestimate the impact of European patriarchy on organizations and on our thinking and how we operate within our families. And especially through the religious systems where the woman is endemically evil. She's a spare rib. She's the root of all evil, basically. This is going to impact on your psyche. So if you come into your consciousness and you now join an organization, all these things don't disappear. But I think the organization, the fact that it's African-centered, Pan-Africanist, nationalist, then I think you certain works that you read, certain discussions that you have will gear you towards one aim, and you will not see your African woman as a threat. You will see the African woman as key, an important vehicle, intrinsic to our freedom. To worry.
Don't worry. I want to ask, and so I'm trying. Well, I'm trying. The questions that I've been asking, I'm trying to relate to the issues and the agency of women. But obviously, we are dealing with feminism and African womanhood, and so gender issues do become apparent to that. So I want to address you mamas in terms of okay. So at the reparations rebellion the other day, a sister on the mic said. And I don't recall who she was representing or what organization or formation, or whether she was just an individual. But she said, and I quote, "The same way you have been oppressed by the white man, we have been oppressed by you," referring to African men. Yeah. And in recent years, there's a popular terminology associated with the intersectional movement, which is that Black men are the white men of the Black community. In other words, that Black men access power and oppress Black women within Black communities with that power. Yeah. Now, I want to take that question not just only on the local but on the global in like majority Black nations. Yeah. And there might be nuances or differentiations between the two. Do you, as Afrocentric women, find any traction in those statements, any truth in that perspective?
If I may, certainly we've said it several times, we've been subjected to the negative influence of the West. And certainly some Black men have not been so kind to Black women. But we have never, I think it's really far-fetched and really act of bad faith to compare Black men to, to white men. I mean, for me, there's just no comparison. First of all, historically, Black women, we're not enslaved by Black men to begin with. And then the issue again has to do with the institutional power. What institutional power do Black men have that is even comparable to the institutional power of white men that could justify such a statement? It's a very sweeping statement, and I totally disagree with that. I recognize the influence of patriarchy. I'm not denying this, right? But I will not compare the two at all.
Would you say the same goes for like majority Black African nations in the Caribbean and on the continent, whereby there's a social system that we may look at and see elements of patriarchy, whereby whereas we might say that there was more ma'at in ancient times, we might look at it today and say, well, clearly there's a breakdown of ma'at in this situation, and marital systems are empowering men to the detriment of women. There are many that would identify those things. Are they misguided, or is there truth?
Well, I think that given that we do not operate for the most part on our own cultural terms, then of course we're going to find many very disturbing situations. But I'm in the Caribbean right now. Well, it's not a quote-unquote independent nation, whatever that means. But so you see Black men who seem to have some social power, but so do Black women. And I still would not agree with that statement. I mean, because somehow it's letting white people off the hook. Right. It's letting off the hook. And it goes back to that intersectionality I was mentioning that you talked about a little bit too. This notion that nobody is absolutely oppressed, that we're all oppressed and oppressors, you see? So Black men may be oppressed by white men, but now become oppressors in relation to Black women. And so Black men are also oppressive and therefore have no ground to stand on to criticize white men's abusive behavior, So it's a very tricky thing. I would definitely not put the two, on the same level at all. Because again, we don't operate on our own cultural terms.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mama. Mama Kai?
Tenamari, I think Mama said it all really. I just use a colloquial term, a bag of nonsense. I don't know whether the sister is somebody that's informed or somebody just feeling the vibes. I don't know. But to compare African men to oppressing, where these African men oppressing? Our African men, unfortunately, lack a lot of confidence, self-esteem. And this is what plays out. When people lack confidence, have low self-esteem, don't put much value on themselves, we act in some very weird and wonderful ways. And violence against women, oppressing women, you're in a society that encourages that. And it's the norm in terms of thinking. And so, but to say that our men are oppressing African women, and if you look at African nations, these African nations are not even controlled by us. These African nations, or these nations in the Caribbean, they're totally under the control of Europe and America, right? Our great leaders, they killed our leaders. They killed Thomas Sankara and Patrice Lumumba, and those are the great leaders that we had in Mama Africa that was going to change the paradigm. They killed them, or they exiled them. And these puppets that they have in Africa and the Caribbean right now are just playing out a game. It's only when we are empowered as a people and we rise up and take back our nations, then we will see what the true African man and woman can do. But right now, it's just a game. It's like this pandemic. It's just a whole big bunch of mockery that they have us involved in. It's just frightening, to be honest. So I don't know which Black man with all this power. There's no power. He hasn't got no power. He feels disempowered. That's why he's acting out like that. But if he was in an organization, join a Pan-African organization, feel empowered, know your true worth, your true value, you're less likely to lift your hand to your woman. Tenamari.
You mentioned Thomas Sankara, Mama Kai. I am minded. By the way, no name. I'd like to see names. There's somebody trying to get through, and we can't get a. I like to see. Yeah, I'm a bit skeptical, love. All right, one second, Mama. let me address something very quickly. All right, hold on. Right, my brother or my sister, what's your name, please? Not them gone. Them gone. All right, kings and queens. Yes. So you mentioned Thomas Sankara, Mama Kai. I'm minded about the fact that he felt the need to address certain issues in the nation of Burkina Faso. And in fact in Grenada under Maurice Bishop, whereby there was a law in Burkina Faso where if a girl's going to school and she gets pregnant, she could be excluded. Yeah. But the boy who impregnated her can still go to school, and so he overturned that law. And then he would do things like he instituted a day for men to go to the market, and purchase the goods for the household as a means for restoring. Well, he wouldn't have said ma'atic balance, but I would consider it in that in that sense, because I think it was felt that there were certain institutions within the societies, what's it called? Maurice Bishop and the New Deal movement, the revolutionary government, they had a national women's organization and instituted the first law apparently that they instituted was one whereby that banned men in senior positions in the workplace, from making sexual advances on their women workforce and them kind of things there. So it would appear that based upon the acts of our men that were on the revolutionary path, that it was felt that there were issues, like serious issues that needed to be addressed, if that makes sense. So I'm just putting
definitely. I think definitely. I think that's what I'm saying, that because of what we've gone through, there are things that we're going to have to institutionalize, to address the gender imbalances. But the African spiritual tradition addresses that. It addresses that, and then we're going to have to look at ways if we address it in principle, but we are finding it difficult to actualize it, then we may have to put things in place to make that happen. Yeah, Tinamari.
Did you want to add to that, Mama Mazama?
No, I agree with Mama Kai, absolutely. I mean, there's no denying that there are issues. Of course, there are issues. As I said, the assault, patriarchal assaults on our culture, have been devastating, and so we have a lot of repairing to do. We have a lot of repairing to do, a lot, but we have to do it together.
Yes, Mama. Give thanks, kings and queens. We're going to be wrapping up in 10 minutes, So if anybody does want to come through and interact with our mamas, do now or forever hold your peace. Do now or forever hold your peace. Mama Kai, I'm going to address a question specifically to Mama Kai and then a question specifically to Mama Mazama, but Eva can feel free to chime in on each other's question. Mama Kai, one time, some years ago, you said white feminism oppresses African men. Right? And I've had to use that dubplate a couple of times since then. But just can you give some clarity on what do you mean by that?
Okay, Tenamore. I think for the simple fact, and I think Mama broke it down in her presentation. I think for the simple fact that it is an antagonistic philosophy. It is antagonistic against European men. And so
African men, you mean?
European men. Right. So for African women to embrace this philosophy, we are now fighting our men instead of fighting the system.
Right.
Or fighting Europeans. Our men become the target, right? Our men become the target as or so-called the enemy. We are now siding with European women as somehow being our allies, and we are ganging up on African men. The European man and the European woman have both been our oppressors. They have both been enemies in this fight. And so when we now join some type of philosophy against African men, then it's a danger to them. It's a danger to the African family. I mean, I don't know, I can't remember how long ago I said that, but now I would put more emphasis on feminism is in danger to the African family. It's a danger to the family. It's a danger to African men and African women.
Don't worry. And just to add to that, in Mama Mazama's book, Mama Cleonora Hudson Weems has an essay in there on Afrikan Womanism, and I believe it's in there, or maybe am I confusing it with something else? But she speaks about the fact that feminism has status within the academy, and so that gives it relative power within the society. If that makes sense.
Like Marxism and Leninism,
right? You know what I'm saying, them kind of things there. But my question for you, Mama Mazama, in fact, I'm gonna prelude the question with a quote, from a book that I have not read fully, but I've engaged some of the sisters' other work, and she's a great fan of Baba Sheikh Anta Diop. She goes by the name of Ife Amaduimi, and she, in her book, Reinventing Africa, Matriarchy, Religion and Culture, she says the following, quote, "The traditional power of African women had an economic and ideological basis which derived from the importance accorded motherhood. I have argued that this issue of the structural status of motherhood is the main difference between the historical experiences of African women and those of European women. This is directly linked to the histories of the family in these different systems. Frederick Engels argued that the European patriarchal family has been the roots and the seat of women's oppression. I believe that it also explains why European women never achieved women's organizations and self-government as African women did." She has another book where she goes into, it's called African Matriarchy, the Igbo case or something like that, right? Now, the reason why I'm prefacing the question with that, Mama Mazama, is that when we look at feminism, it's very much fueled by scholarship and the academy, the Western Academy. Yes. I don't know if the women focused work of Afrocentric women is as prominent. Well, it's not as prominent. So who would you suggest our brothers and sisters engage from a scholarship perspective if they wanted to look into Afrocentric or more Afrocentrically inclined woman scholarship, specifically on women issues or gender issues?
Well, I mentioned Cleonora Hudson Weems. There are a few women. In fact, we're working on a book that Cleonora is editing, African Womanism. And there are men and women writing on the topic of African Womanism.
Okay.
So there are a few women, but Cleonora to me has reading her would really get to the heart of the problem and the issues and the best way to deal with it.
Yes. I will say that reading her, she will also direct you, and in fact, Nathan and Julia here, they will also, if you check their sources and some of their quotations, they will also lead you to other African women, especially those on the continent who are.
Yes, but the thing with Cleonora is that she's Afrocentric.
Yes. Understood.
So of course there are so many African women who've written on the topic, but if you want the Afrocentric perspective, I think she got it.
Point taken.
And that's why I included it on the Afrocentric paradigm. You see.
Yes. No, I
African Womanism. African Womanists will not be affiliated with women's studies programs or departments. They would be in Africology departments because that's where they belong. You see. Because there would be no room for them in women's studies because women's studies are basically feminist studies. Yes. So, that's also why we don't hear about them so much because they don't have the institutional respect, and promotion as, Black studies scholars versus women studies scholars.
Point taken, Mama.
Brother Shakara. I was going to also add Mama Marimba Annie, even though she doesn't necessarily deal, well, she does. She has a book called, I think I even have it right near me. To be African, that's it. Yeah, To be African, where she deals with certain subjects, but also Yurugu. Let the circle be unbroken. And that's more of like a holistic approach. But again, she's dealing with the nature of woman from an African perspective. Tinamore.
She also has a speech online where called To Be an African Woman, where she's addressing certain. It's a very good speech, so I would encourage it. All right.
If I may I add, as Sister Kai was talking about Mambani, I thought about Frances West Welsing.
Yeah.
I think the last chapter of the ISIS papers, it's a call for Black women, for African women, to get ourselves together and fight, along with our men against white supremacy. So I would definitely recommend her as well. Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Mama Mazama. All right, kings and queens. It looked like, especially I know that our brothers and sisters in the States are it's the middle of the day there, so everybody there work hard, want to go to the gym. You know what I'm saying, something like that, So yeah, but so a few of them, I'm saying that because a few of them are saying, yeah, I'd love to come on, but I'm tied up with this or tied up with that at the moment. I'm on the plantation or whatever. So we appreciate that, kings and queens. We have a question that we'll probably make this the final question. So we've got 2 questions, and these are going to be the final 2 questions. And we'll wrap up. Okay, my question from Sankofa Rising. My question is: the mamas have said that returning to our traditions will help to free us. However, many feminists will say that our traditions are oppressive and do not serve us either. Yes. And so so I guess the question is implicit, within the statement. Is that the case? That our traditions are also oppressive, that pre-colonial Africa is also misogynistic and patriarchal. Oh, sorry, one second. Sorry, Mama, mamas. 1 second, there's a follow-up here. But then the next question to our mamas is: how does one know how far back to go in our traditions that speaks to our complementary nature?
How does one know how far back to go? When it go in time? What do they mean?
Yeah, so it's so basically, so I guess in the sense of the fact that if we look at like just before enslavement, we might go back and we might see some things that are not basically how do we differentiate what is real African tradition from what is not, in a sense? Like can we take it for granted that pre-colonial Africa is African tradition? Because some people are going to say, well, it was also patriarchal and oppressive. And is that actually the case?
Tendamore.
Okay, Mama. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Mama. Go ahead.
I think once you understand and you're studying and trying to live an African spiritual way of life, then you go back as far as our research will ever take us. And it doesn't matter which state in time. If you go to Mama Africa now and somebody say, oh, this is a spiritual practice, you will know whether it's genuine or not. Because there's a part of you that's intuitive. There's a part of you that have studied. Those of us that have studied the traditions, we know what is nature-based, what isn't nature-based. And so if it falls within the concept of nature-based practices, which it will enhance the African man and woman coming together, which will empower the African family, then we know whether that is an imposition of somebody else's philosophy or not. So you have some traditions where, in the Muslim tradition, a woman doesn't even go to her husband's burial, things like that. I'm trying to think of some of the things. If you were to go amongst traditionalists and you were to see certain practices, you would you study the environment. Who are the oppressive forces that were there? What are their ways, their traditions? What I'm saying is that it's an ongoing study. But knowing that we are nature-based people, if the actions or the practices that are taking place is not holistic, it's not empowering, it is not unifying, then it's not African. You know, we don't have to, you know, over kill ourselves. It's not African. Tendamore.
Mama Mazama?
Yes, I agree. And I think there's also involved in this a problem, which is that our own dislocation, you know, ourselves, and are we taking on, you know, those white spectacles that Garvey was talking about? Saying, you know, take those spectacles off, take those glasses off, put black glasses on. But that comes with a lot of study. You know, we have to study ourselves a lot, as much as we can, and then engage in a personal and collective process of basic cleansing ourselves, you know, getting rid of those alien elements that just don't feel right, like Mama Kai was saying. If it does not feel right, then we just need to get rid of it and not erase that, you know.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mama Zama. Right. As a brother Anika says, as a writer to that question, I'm not sure which question. Does that mean that black feminism is the way forward? How is black feminism different to white feminism? And he said that he appreciates that this may have been discussed earlier, which it was touched on, but I'm sure that some of us have come late, so you might want to touch on it again, mamas. How is black feminism different to white feminism? And this is an important question, because a lot of ultra black feminists will tell you that black feminism is different. The black feminist challenges, the racial perspective of the white feminists in vigorous ways, all right? And it's a totally different trajectory, and they'll put forward bell hooks, they'll put forward Angela Davis, they'll put forward Alice Walker, and others in that sphere as a distinct form of feminism that is different and challenging to the white feminists. So how is black feminism different from white feminism, and is it therefore the way forward?
If I may, black feminism and white feminism are different in terms of their focus. Black feminism focuses on black women, and white feminism, in fact, we shouldn't even say white feminism, we should just say feminism, because feminism is by definition white, focuses on the experiences, challenges of white women. So these are the differences of focus. And the black feminists try to bring in the racial oppression piece, you know, by saying that they are oppressed, you know, because they're black. But gender is first. Gender oppression is first. Then you deal with, you know, racial oppression, economic oppression, but gender oppression is first. And this is what feminists, whether they call themselves black or white, share. There is no questioning on the part of black feminists of the cultural assumptions built into feminism. And so that's the major problem. Black feminism cannot be the way forward, because feminism is a white cultural product and a white cultural and political project, which cannot be ours. I talked in particular about the fact that feminism is a conflict theory that antagonizes men and women. In our culture, men and women are not antagonistic, they are complementary. And so therefore, if you're an African person, you should not be comfortable with any theory, any paradigm that claims that men and women are enemies. That's my answer.
Tenamore, I mean, I agree with everything that Mama said. I won't necessarily answer that question again, because she's already said it. But just to go back onto the previous question, there was a earlier part where it said how far.
Should we look back?
No. Some people say that going back is you know, is old and what have you, something like that. Some comments that and just to remind us that what if when we go to ancient Africa, you see the monuments, the cradle of civilization, the birth of humanity. You can see everything that was laid down, science, architecture, archaeology, astronomy. I mean, the monuments that we built, there's none comparable in the world today. Nobody could be oppressed to be able to do that. No oppressed people could have done that. And so certainly no oppressed woman. So when people talk about going back is a great thing, because that's where we're going to get our true strength from. Tendamwari.
Tendamwari. All right, kings and queens, we're going to conclude there. I do want to give the Mambo Amma an opportunity to speak to, because brothers and sisters may not know about some of the works that are going on in the international world community. And so there is a monumental program that Afrocentricity International has, which is the development of an African spiritual temple, for want of a better term, a petit sut, yeah. I believe you're dealing with Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, just inform our viewers about that a little piece, Mama, just so we know.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity, brother. Basically, that we decided to purchase a piece of land, which we did. And I want to say that AI is an absolutely independent organization. We're a Black nationalist, Black culturalist, cultural nationalist organization. And we believe in doing for ourselves. So we purchased a piece of land, and for the purpose of erecting what we call the temple of the African Renaissance, and we picked Côte d'Ivoire for a variety of reasons. And so we basically, and we're doing this because we feel that's very important for people to get out of Christianity and Islam in particular, but that we must provide people with an alternative, and the alternative is themselves, it's ourselves. So our temple is built near a village, the village of Jem. I'm very happy that the people responsible for the village are also part of the organization, that they've given us access to a sacred forest and water for our rituals. And we really want to, validate ourselves, validate our traditions, validate our knowledge, medicinal knowledge, and so on and so forth. Validate who we are, and do it ourselves by erecting this temple to honor ourselves, honor our ancestors, and show our people that in order to experience a divine connection, we don't have to go to a church or a mosque, that we can create, a sacred space and be divine and sacred in that space. So that's what our temple is about.
And did you say it's not? But it's not built yet, though, is it, Mama?
It is not built yet. We're going to start soon. We are seeking, permits, building permits at the time being. But we're going to start soon. We cannot delay this any further. And although we don't have the funds yet, we believe that as we start the construction, we've already built two structures. One is a building that has 8 bedrooms, and another one which serves as temporary sanctuary, which is also where we have workshops and rituals. But the main building, the temple itself, has not been built yet, but it will start soon. The ancestors want us to do this work.
Yes, Mama. Well, we look forward to the grand opening. I'm gonna start saving up my pennies from now, because anytime it open, one did it. Yeah.
Oh yes.
You know what I mean? Yes. We have to be there, kings and queens, and I'm sure Brother Lee is going to want to be in the vicinity as well. So we look forward to being there with you and elevating our ancestors and the forces.
Although they complain.
Right, kings and queens, we're gonna wrap up there. By the way, I do want to say, however, that if you are in the UK and you are looking for an African spiritual focus, you can join us every first Omoja, every first Sunday of the month for Shumida, our African-centered spiritual worship, kings and queens. Every first Omoja Sunday of the month is currently online because everywhere is on lockdown in London at the moment. And so once they open up spaces again, we will be gathering in the physical. But if you want more information, check Alkebu-Lan.org, as you can see on your screens right now. And just hit the button that says Shumira, that's SHUMIRA. And you'll get all the information that you need to join us every first Sunday of the month, kings and queens. And right now, I'm going to hand over to Brother Olatunji Heru to close us out. Tena mwari.
Tena mwari.
Tena mwari.
Tena mwari.
Tena mwari.
Tena mwari.
Give thanks and praises to Mambo Ama and Sister Kai for another riveting Mosiah session. Brother Shakara, so this will be available to watch again on Alkebu-Lan Way, I take it, yeah? So yes, those of you who missed some of the session, go to YouTube, Alkebu-Lan Way, and watch again, please. Again, this is our Mosiah season, sisters and brothers, so please join us again. Go to alkebu-lan.org for any updates. Join us again next Kujugulia evening, next Monday evening, on Galaxy Radio, galaxyfewi.com, the only D-Brain watching station, every Monday 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. That's summertime, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern time. I believe that's midday to 2 p.m. Pacific time. We're dealing with all issues around the life and legacy of Marcus Mosiah Garvey and uplifting our people towards our total liberation. So yes, just want to give thanks and praises for those brothers and sisters who tuned in. Want to hail up Afrocentricity International Brazil, who hail us up in the chat, and also all the sisters and brothers from around the world who joined us this evening. Join us again this time next week. We'll be dealing with neocolonialism with our brother Abiola So from National Kamit, based in Paris and the Congo. So that'll be this same time, this same place, sisters and brothers, next Juma evening, next Tuesday evening, which will be the 18th of this month.
Tenamari. Mosiah Day at 2.
Indeed, we will have Mosiah Day next Kujugule. So even before we have our Africa Speak show next Kujugule Day, next Monday evening, 17th, Mosiah Day is Earth Strong of the eminent prophet and king, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and we will normally, as we do every year, and this year will be no exception, in spite of the lockdown and all the stuff that's going on, we're going to be gathering in person, face to face. You should remember what that's like, sisters and brothers. We'll be gathering on the 17th day of Mosiah at headquarters, 282 Howard Leighton, and that'll be from midday to give thanks and praises.
3 p.m.
Was it 12 to 3?
Yes, core time, 12 to 3.
Yeah, 12 to 3.
If they bring a reading of Papa Garvey's or something cultural, some words work of their own, or want to read a poem, some that's inspired around Papa Garvey, just to remind ourselves that we're honoring 100 years of the red, black, and the green. So we wear our red, black, and green. We wear our sash, and can I just say, brothers and sisters, we're also honoring 100 years of Mama Louise Bennett, also affectionately known as Miss Lou, or one of our cultural icons. And so I just want to put her in the frame as well, brothers and sisters, Tendai Mori, because she is integral in terms of bringing together the lifting African spirit, African culture, and putting it in the mainstream, and connecting African language with the pattern that we speak in the Caribbean. So Mama Louise Bennett, if we just keep her in our hearts, 100 years, Tendai Mori.
Tendai Mori. So yeah, so just going to close out with a vote of thanks. Have to again thank our guest, Mambo Ama, like Brother Shakara said earlier, when we first met at ALD, African Liberation Day, organized by the PACM, I believe it was 2006. The soul connection was made there. I'm going to hail up Mama Mazama, as well as Baba Molefekete Asante for bringing us Afrocentricity, which has been so much to guide our understanding of African culture and organizing. I want to give thanks and praises to our brother leader Mbandaka, the spiritual leader of the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, whose vision brought into being this community Mosiah observance from the year 1998, so-called, until now. I want to hail up the management of Galaxy Radio for enabling us to host our Mosiah sessions online every Monday evening. I want to hail up all the members of the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement for keeping Mosiah going. I want to hail up a young brother, Shakara, for hosting this evening, as well as being so instrumental in putting together this year's Mosiah program as well. So what we do, sisters and brothers, as a movement, we always close in a particular way by placing our left hand on our hearts and our right hands in the air. And we say, let's remind ourselves to take from here all that we've learned in knowledge, information, and inspiration out into the streets, into our personal lives, a place of work, a place of study amongst our families and friends. Let us remind ourselves always to be a shining light unto Africans everywhere. Let Africans everywhere know that Mwari, Olodomare, Lodume Studume, Nobukurane, Nzambi, Nananyame, the African God, reigns supreme. Let Africans everywhere know that it is a joy to be an African. And let Africans everywhere know that liberation is indeed at hand. Tendamwari, 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 Garvey lives!
Garvey lives!
Garvey
Garvey
lives.
lives!
Mosiah
Mosiah
lives!
lives!
Mosiah
Mosiah
lives!
lives! Mosiah lives!
Sisters and brothers, give thanks and praises for joining us this evening. Let's hail him.